For better or worse, depending on who you asked, the Jak and Daxter franchise changed forever with Jak 2. The platformer was gone and the open world adventure game was in. While mostly gaining praise from critics, fan response was more mixed about Jak 2, so about a year later, Jak 3 hit store shelves to wrap the trilogy up. To be honest, there wasn't too much I could dig up on Jak 3's development other than what I found in Jak 3's design bible, but I'll bring that up when we talk about the story. I did remember playing Jak 3 a little bit after finishing 2, and I remember enjoying this one, and that was kind of about it. Okay, I remember like story beats and some new features that were added, but like, honestly, most of the game just kind of feels like a blur to me, and this is usually considered the favorite of the trilogy.
So I'm really curious, after my recent playthrough of Jak 2, is Jak 3 really good, or is my memory a sign of things to come? Well, enough beating around the bush, let's dive into it.
So the game takes place 1 year after Jak 2, where Jak is thrown out into the wasteland to fend for himself. Why is this happening? Well, a bunch of KG robots are back running amok in Haven City, as well as a small batch of metalheads that survived and are starting to do what they do best. With Jak's previous connections to crew, the council decides to go and throw him out of the city. Though probably pushing that agenda is this new Vigor guy who's trying to rise through the ranks of Haven City and take it over, as well as unlock the catacombs below the city to obtain the powers of the precursor for himself. Ashland ends up giving Jak a beacon that helps a group called the Wastelanders, led by their king Deimos, to find him and bring him back to Spargus. Once there, Jak has to prove his skills in the arena before he's granted citizenship to the city, as Deimos believes everything is either useful or dead weight, a dog-eat-dog kind of society. Though I am gonna question the arena here. Everyone needs to do it in order to be granted access to the city, and they're straight up killing in the arenas. So one citizen needs to kill like 80 others? Is it maybe some kind of population control? But while Jak does some missions to get on the city's good side, the two meet a monk who has on their hands a Dark Maker, who is linked to the Daystar, pretty much a warning sign that the end of the world is imminent, and once that thing lands on the planet, all hope is lost. So Jak and Daxter start exploring to find anything that will help them fight it off, and come across a precursor statue that gives Jak the power of Light Jak, finally balancing his dark half. Later on, Jak and Daxter end up finding the means back to Haven City, where Jak just kind of helps the Resistance take it back. It's almost exactly like Jak 2. Though I do like when you first enter the city, there's almost no one around and it gives off an eerie atmosphere. Makes Haven City really feel like a ghost town. And if it sounds like in this plot summary I'm really giving you the bare bones, I'm really not, trust me. But in time, Jak ends up getting his name cleared with Ashland just dissolving the council, nullifying their vote. I guess she can just do that? And they eventually get into the KG factory to find the one behind all of this is a reanimated Earl, who has been in contact with the Dark Makers and is helping them plan for the end of the world. I guess I should mention that the Dark Makers are precursors that succumb to the power of Dark Eco, and the only way to stop them is to use the plant's defense system in its core, which lies in the catacombs. Jak goes to help the Wastelanders from the Dark Makers invading, and is considered by Deimos to be a full-fledged member of Spargus, and given the armor he was saving for his son who vanished years ago. Turns out Deimos was the original leader of Haven City, who Baron Praxis ended up vanishing, and since then formed Spargus to give a refuge to those outside of Haven's walls. Deimos gives Jak a beacon that they can call the Wastelanders for help at any time. As the battle in Haven City starts to ramp up, Jak ends up using the beacon, and when he's cornered,
these adventures, they've been great.
Deimos comes in for the rescue. I do want to mention it's only like 5 minutes from that beacon being activated to this. How far away is Spargus from Haven, or was Deimos doing a full Sonic Unleashed boosting with that car? Well, one explosion ends up toppling the car and leaving Deimos with his legs caught underneath. In his dying breath, he hands Jak an amulet that his son was wearing, and Deimos dies in the hands of Jak, realizing that Deimos was his father. Meanwhile, Vigor over here is ready to just add salt into that wound, as he says he was the one that abducted Jak to use him for experiments, but lost him to the underground, and makes his way to the precursor catacombs, with Jak and Daxter giving chase. The duo end up reaching the core and start power to the plant's defenses, with the precursors offering Jak the chance to become one of them, but Vigor ends up taking the power for himself. The precursors warn them that it might be too late to save the planet, with Jack and Daxter honestly just having enough of the precursors sitting on the sideline doing nothing, which causes this to happen.
Oh my god.
This is my favorite twist in the whole series. The precursors being revealed to be a bunch of Otzels that are the most powerful creatures in the universe, but by their words,
if you knew we precursors were a bunch of little fuzzy rats, would you worship us? Could we run the universe?
Not possible, buddy.
So, we fluff up the myth a bit.
And we get the respect we deserve.
They also say since Eco contains their makeup, when Daxter fell into the Dark Eco in Jak and Daxter, he ended up being blessed with precursor powers himself. I love how that twist ties back into the more cartoonish comedic side of the series, while also fitting snug into continuity. It's also foreshadowed a few times with scenes saying Daxter bears the color of their makers, but even then I was taken off guard by the reveal and I'll never forget that feeling of being blindsided by it. As will Vigor, because he has a horrible realization that him asking to become a precursor turns him into an Otzel. I know this is played up as a joke since he's now just a rat that's even abducted by Cleaver, a character I haven't even mentioned to now because he's kind of just there honestly, but he has the powers of a god. We really just gonna let him run around free unchecked, guys? While our duo make their way onto the Darkmaker ship, Earl manages to take one of their Titan mechs down to the planet, but Jak and Daxter are able to finish the job and save the planet once again. Oh, and the most important part, Daxter gets pants. True character development right there.
So did that sound really disjointed? Well, that's because it kind of is. Jak 3's plot is all over the place.
One of the biggest issues for me right off the bat is the beginning. Jak getting exiled feels so forced. I mean, the crew connection is one thing, but like, Ashlyn was willing to help her father with everything he was doing last time. Also, Sig just gets away scot-free for the same crime. Doesn't help that Sig is also revealed to be a spy for the Wastelanders in Haven City, but that ends up going nowhere. Also, if Ashlyn could just disband the council by herself on a dime, why didn't she do that the first time? They don't spend much time going into stuff like this, so it feels like an excuse to make Jak a rebel again, but it's a lame excuse at that. Speaking about that Haven City, it's really underplayed this time. It's clear Spargus and the Wasteland are the real focus, because when you go back to the city, it's pretty much just repeating the same motions that you did in Jak 2, but without much weight to the actions. Like, the metalheads are there just cause seriously, they are so underplayed this time and have nothing going on with the main plot. At least the KG robots and Darkmakers are kind of connected by Earl, and man, what a weak big bad. This guy was barely even our rival in Jak 2, and trying to promote him to our big bad doesn't really work. The dude is frankly even less memorable than he was last time, and honestly, I don't think you needed him at all. The Darkmakers feel like their own bigger entity than Earl to begin with, so why do we need this middleman? And as for the Darkmakers, they're there. Honestly, the idea for them is solid, but the execution does kind of come off as another monster of the week to take down, and I feel like the metalheads worked better in that role. I know I'm far from the only one saying this, but for the role that Errol had, Vigor did the job significantly better, and you don't even fight the guy. A lot of that is thanks to Philomar's performance, but Vigor eats up almost every scene. He has way more presence than Earl could ever have. Plus, he's the one pulling the strings on getting Jak thrown out, so we as the player already want to take him down, and then you get scenes like Deimos' death and stuff like this.
Father, yes, you were that child. I took you from Deimos, hoping to harness your eco powers for my experiments. Then I lost you to the underground. You seem upset. Did I tell you too late? You were the son of the great warrior Deimos. Oh, and he never knew. How delightful.
But I will be real, I think like Praxis, he's remembered more for his actor than what the character actually does, cause other than exiling Jak, what does Vigor actually accomplish in this story? Not much. You hardly even know much about the guy. I think he could have been really great if the game could just focus on a single villain, because all of these entities don't have the same presence that Praxis, Core, or Crew had from last time, and they barely interact with one another. And while Earl is working with the Dark Makers, we never actually see what their working relationship is like. Say if one of them is trying to portray each other or such. Dark Makers honestly just feel like an excuse why Earl has an army and that's it. And Vigor and Earl don't interact once. I really don't get that at all, and really cements how the villains feel so separated. That separation also exists between Sparkus and Haven City sections of the game. Sparkus, you do have an entire storyline there with becoming one of them, and that's where the real meat of the story is. And once you get to Haven City in Act 2, the story just kinda stops here. You don't really get anything new until Earl shows up. And there's not a connecting tissue between the events of both towns. There's even this part where Ashlyn pleads for Jack to come back, but Jack says, Haven threw me out, they can rot for all I care.
I'm through saving the world.
And literally your next mission is finding your way into Haven City to help them. Like, what? Did something get cut there? I kind of wonder if the same thing happened when it came to Kira, because wow, man, they just kind of pushed her into a broom closet. She just stands there now becoming the mute of the group, and I think she has like less than 5 lines in the whole game. And instead the game really pushes Ashlyn, like a lot, even though she really doesn't grow much in this game. And like, I think the writers really wanted Ashlyn Jack to be a thing. Didn't she have a thing with Torn at the end of last game? What happened to that? Because of how weird a lot of choices felt, I wanted to see if there was something that happened internally for why things feel so messy. Maybe a change in writers or some development changes? And since I think I know my comment section well enough, there are gonna be Ratchet fans bringing up my Crack in Time video here. Basically how I didn't mention how almost 10,000 lines of dialogue of the script went unused and how a huge chunk of the story isn't there. Well, here's the thing. I didn't mention it because while playing it, I didn't really feel like it was missing. I felt like what I was playing was the intended narrative experience. Also helps that Crack in Time story is fun throughout. If the writers, editors, and everyone involved in the story process can hide the fact that there was unused material, then they're doing their job. It's part of the process to make it look like there wasn't ideas dropped and such, even if they were. Storytelling is an illusion after all. But in Jak 3, even before researching, I could feel all the cut corners while playing it. And I only dived into this stuff because I wanted to find the reason why it felt so disjointed. And thanks to the commentary in Jak 3 Design Bible, yeah, it seems like there were plenty of last minute changes done to Jak 3's plot. Like for example, Seam was supposed to die, which is why in their last scene, Tara Strong's lines are much more graspy, as that was supposed to be Seam's dying moments. And probably the biggest omission would be Deimos' attack on Haven City, in hopes of reclaiming it now that Praxis was gone, forcing Jack to pick a side in the conflict. Which would explain that was supposed to be the event that tied the two plots together, because without it, it makes Haven City feel like, hey, do you guys like Jak 2? Sort of section. This also may have been removed to make Deimos a more sympathetic character, since he ends up being a father figure to Jak. Makes sense considering they actually are father and son. And I do find Deimos to be the most interesting character in Jak 3. You can tell he cares for his people, but he also makes sure to take those who won't hold his city back, and the few bonding moments that you do get with Jak and Deimos are great, and it's a good reveal on finding out about that connection. Though I won't lie, I think that death scene is played out a little much. It's a bit over the top. Doesn't help that only his legs are underneath. Like, I don't think that would be a fatal blow. Like, have a pipe sticking in his chest or something. Also, Deimos, like, please don't name your son after the legendary hero everyone keeps talking about. I thought especially with Ashlyn's line that he was the actual Mar. Hey, this series has time travel, it wouldn't be out of the question. Jak 3 has good moments, but the overall plot doesn't really work, and not nearly as effective as 2's simple, straight-to-the-point plot. Honestly, it feels more like a filler story that was retroactively made to be the finale. Not saying that it was, but that's the vibe it gives off. Story-wise, I'd say this is the weakest one in the series so far. Yeah, even weaker than Jak and Daxter. That plot was simple, but it worked for what it was going for. Jak 3 ends up feeling like it's trying to do far too much, especially with a game trying to juggle so many things and not really landing them. Seriously, there's like 4 or 5 major plot lines and make the game feel way too stretched out for its own good. Especially when this game is shorter than Jak 2, so for the big finale, it ended up story-wise being a pretty forgettable conclusion. Being honest, there's not too much different presentation-wise between Jak 2 and 3. These are games made within a year of each other, so there's gonna be a lot of reused assets, so it's mostly gonna be minor stuff here. I do like the design for Spargus having a very Mad Max feeling, and it fits well in the Jak universe. As for Jak's new design, I think I personally prefer the Jak 2 look, but the Jak 3 one isn't bad, especially when you get the full armor. It works really well. But man, Light Jak looks pretty great, especially when you got the wings. This design is so cool. The voice cast does a great job as per usual, while the story itself is all over the place. The script is probably my favorite one, balancing drama and jokes pretty well this time. Like, I love this part with the missile and just how fast it launches.
I'll handle this.
Something about the speed and how he's just instantly gone makes me laugh. And there's some great character interactions. Like, I think this is easily Daxter's best game yet, and him and Pecker just going after each other at the beginning is one of the highlights for sure. Plus, there's a lot more of Daxter and Jak playing off each other, which really shines.
Oh no! See any feathers here? Looks like fur to me. No feathers, no flyer de axle. There's no way you're gonna get me on some precursor monk crap! Absolutely zippo chance! Forget it! Finito! Fat chance! Not gonna happen! Nope! Nuh-uh! Never! Jak!
The music is about the same for me. It's mostly background stuff, though it did sound more MIDI this time. So, yeah, it's very much like Jak 2 for the presentation, but there's at least a bit more to the gameplay this time. Okay, to get the similarities out of the way, you go in an open world to do missions that will progress the plot, though this time you have two locations. Haven City, which is mostly about the same as last time with a bit of remodeling, and new to this game, Spargus and the Wasteland. Spargus itself is a pretty small town, but the meat of the area is the Wasteland, which is a giant desert that you can drive around with various cars you unlock. In terms of Jak's kit, he can pretty much do everything he could in 2, but he got some new abilities as well. His arsenal has now tripled from 4 to 12 weapons, holy god! But they still work off of the same 4 ammo types. So if you press the corresponding D-pad a certain amount of times, you can switch to the 2nd and 3rd tier weapons. The higher the tier, the more ammo they tend to use to compensate. Dark Jak is still back with his usual kit, but he does have this new fireball attack. Neat. But the big new addition is Light Jak. No longer just a cutscene power. Light Jak can actually do quite a bit. He can heal himself, he can put up a shield, he can slow down time, and he gets a triple jump. You still got side missions to earn precursor orbs that you can use for secrets, and yeah, that's kind of all the new gameplay additions, honestly, for Jak 3. But what are the things that it did right? Okay, first and foremost, let's talk about difficulty, because that was my immediate thought after playing Jak 2. And I can safely say Jak 3 is nowhere near as hard as Jak 2. And the biggest reason why? Check points. Check points. Together now. Checkpoints. Checkpoints are here, frequent, and sensible this time. Oh, thank God. This change alone makes Jak 3 far more tolerable than its predecessor. But that's far from the only quality of life change. Light Jak also gives players a heal button, removing the strict health issue. Health drops can actually come from enemies now. You're given multiple guns that let Jak handle situations in a variety of more ways. These make Jak 3 much more enjoyable in standard missions. Not to mention, you're given weapons at a much faster rate this time. Within the first few minutes, you're given the first 2 guns from Jak 2, so you have a stronger kit right out of the gate. But it goes further with the precursor orbs. First off, these were given much better landmarks for finding the orb missions, and there's more variety in them, such as ring challenges, trick minigames, and redoing older missions. As such, I ended up doing these a lot more, but with the main driving force being getting precursor orbs in the secrets menu. Before, this was just a list down that you can unlock them when you reached a certain amount needed. This time, it's treated more like a shop where you can pick and choose what you want, including cutscenes with anime or commentary, which I really appreciate, concept art, new vehicles, and the ability to use the jetboard in the desert, which you can't use by default? What, does it break just like...
Well, how about next time you get a board that can handle the Neutron style?
For real though, the jet board is much better than last time. The control has been fine-tuned where you don't need to do a perfect spin to get the boost, and as such I use this thing a lot. It honestly became my go-to method for travel in Haven City. You can also get upgrades to your guns to do things such as a higher ammo count, faster shots, wider range. These were always my go-to reward to nab, especially for ones like the Peacemaker, which because you get it halfway through the game this time, get that higher ammo count and increased range, man, this became one of my go-to weapons for the game. And I will say, I think the weapons themselves are a lot more creative and fun than they were to use in Jak 2. I think the red gun is overall the best balance in them. The shotgun with its shot speed increased is really fun. I love the ring gun that you can use to clear out enemies all around you, and the grenade launcher does quick work to enemies with shields. Also, I appreciate with the dark and light Jak forms you can hop in and out of them at any time, which is much welcomed. I appreciate that Daxter is more playable this time around. You get a healthy amount of sections with him, as opposed to the one time you played as him in Jak 2. I'm also appreciative in Haven City there is next to no traffic this time, and the guards will no longer cause high alert, so that makes going through the city a lot less frustrating. But out of the two levels, I would say the Wasteland was a bit more fun as a hub. Mainly because the vehicles provide me more unique ways to go through the environment. And the best one is easily the jumper, because you can go and do stuff like this. Though while Jak 3 made some great changes, not every change was for the better. Yeah, Jak 3 has downsides, and one of them hits you very early on. The vehicles. While they are more interesting than the cars you had in Haven City, they don't exactly control great. Turning with them can be troubling because it never really feels like they can make up their mind on how they want to turn, especially with the ever-changing terrain. It's one of the reasons I use the jumper a lot, so I would spend more time in the air to get a move on. And I think one of the bigger issues is just how much the vehicles are forced on you at the beginning of the game. In Act 1, over half of the missions are vehicle-based. I get wanting to teach players the mechanics, but I think they go a bit overboard, and after Act 1 you use the vehicles 3 times after or something like that? Doesn't seem like it has much payoff for how much it's shoved in your face at the start. Jak 3 also really likes its one-off gameplay styles. They're all over the place, playing as a spider bot, this Pac-Man maze game, the hang glider, this weird overhead view you suddenly have with infinite ammo in this survival mission, the Titan suit returning from Jak 2. It still sucks. These just kinda keep popping up all over the place, and it could be argued that these are used for variety, but honestly there are so few normal missions that it honestly makes a lot of these minigames feel like padding, likely from the 1-year development cycle. Bosses also leave a lot to be desired this time. The Precursor bot is easily the best one and probably the best boss in the trilogy, since it has clear patterns and focused a lot on platforming, but the other two are just mook rushes. That's it. It's not much of a boss. And the game still doesn't have a strafing feature or first-person aiming or auto-adjusting for aiming, but being honest, that last one isn't much of an issue this time, mainly because of the game's weapon lineup. I feel I can classify them into 3 categories. Your normal weapons like the Vulcan Fury and Red Guns and even the Supernova that have good utility while having clear drawbacks. Ones like the Needle Gun, Gravity Influxer, and Plasma Rifle from Jak 2, and Gyro Burster are just not that good. The Needle Gun I only found used for the final boss, as its tracking tended to work a lot better there. But in regular gameplay, it never attacked anything correctly and does pitiful damage, especially compared to the other blue weapons. The Gravity Influxer just makes enemies go into 0G where you can, I guess, combo them or go for a pacifist run and not fight them? Or you can just shoot them with one Peacemaker and be done. I really don't get this one. And the Gyro Burster just fires in the same area as the red weapons, but it just guzzles ammo, so it's completely unreliable. I only used it here to gather footage for it, and then never used it again. And wait, why did I call the Plasma Rifle from 2 bad? That was arguably the best weapon in Jak 2. Well, it's not great in Jak 3 because of my final category of weapons. Ones like the Lightning Gun and the Reflexer, which just break the game in half completely. It's laughable. The Lightning Gun uses less ammo when you just tap it than the Vulcan Fury. The range is insane, and if you get the upgrade from the shot that does more damage to robots, this thing just rips through a room in an instant. Even without the upgrade, it's pretty nuts. And the Reflexer, the Reflexer. Honestly, I love using this one, but it is way too powerful for its own good. Take the plasma rifle, but now make every shot you fire ricochet off of enemies and walls, and make the bullets auto-aim to everything around them, and each bullet can hit multiple times. But remember that spin trick from Jak 2? Do that in this game with the Reflexer, and it's hardly a combat encounter anymore. Most of the time, I could clear an entire room out before I even entered the room. It's a one-size-fits-all gun that kind of has the same problem as, say, Balloon in Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance, or Metal Blade in Mega Man 2, where it's so good that it invalidates every other weapon by the sheer fact it can do everything the other weapons can do, but a lot more efficiently. And you have to make a conscious effort not to use it if you want any challenge. And even if I ran out of ammo for this thing, well, I just use one of my other game-breaking guns until I get it back. And then you have Dark and Light Jak, which the game tries to make a big point of balancing Jak's light and dark half. You're using Light Jak almost exclusively, because Dark Jak is even more of an afterthought than he was in 2. I think I only used him for the AoE once in a blue moon, and when the game forces you to change into him into breaking walls. That's it. The Dark meter rarely wasn't at max. Plus, you already do have an actual screen nuke with the Supernova, so I only used the Dark one if I didn't want to use purple ammo. And Light Jak, this is one of those times where younger me thought this was a lot more cool, but as an adult, I can see through all the cracks, and he's okay. Light Jak ultimately amounts to a fancy heal button. That's easily the best feature he's got, and the only one really worth using. He gets this barrier, but it's never really required, and the healing is just a more worthwhile option. The slowing down time is only used for like 3 points at the beginning of the game, and then never again. And the multiple jumps at the end is neat, but there's only like 2 platforming sections with it, and then it's the end of the game. So Light Jak really doesn't end up meaning that much. Which kinda leads into one of the biggest problems about Jak 3. The game gives you a ton of options, and then you hardly need most of them. I know I went on a lot about how hard Jak 2 was, but honestly, if it had more reasonable checkpoints, and was a bit more consistent on stuff like enemy AI, health, and vehicles, it would still be hard, but I think a lot more fair, honestly, of a challenge. And you have to use most of your options in order to make it through. Jak 3, I hardly touched Dark Jak. Light Jak was almost strictly for healing when I needed it. I only ended up using about 3 of my 12 weapons for most of the game. Not to mention all the upgrades you can get from the shop. It's like they made a game for Jak 2 Jak, but didn't compensate for all the new tools that Jak has in this game. And I won't lie, it gets pretty boring. I was on autopilot for so much of the game, I can hardly tell you about any mission or level, because they honestly all play so identical. I could just walk through any normal mission and be done. No enemies stood a chance in my way, not really any memorable platforming sections, not even fun ways to go through missions like Jak 2, it's very linear. When I had to re-record some missions because of a file crash, why does this keep happening when I record Jak and Daxter? I don't like that. Anyway, when I had to redo them, I just kind of played them, didn't even flinch, and yeah, there was no frustration, it was really just boredom. I kind of had the same expression on my face for most of the game. And you'd think I would get more out of hero mode this time, but you start with all your game-breaking stuff, so you kind of just break the game faster. Like, the difficulty doesn't feel that much higher, so I just kind of got bored of that too and didn't really bother finishing it again. But it also doesn't help that there were other problems from Jak 2 that really weren't addressed. Like, vehicle missions are noticeably lacking in checkpoints compared to the rest of the game. Now, these aren't nearly as hard as the Jak 2 ones, except for maybe this helipad one with Torn, cause it's kinda strict, not gonna lie. It's not for their difficulty, it's for how long they get. So if you end up messing up at the end of a 5-minute mission, you're now spending another 5 minutes getting back to where you were. It's really noticeable in the mission where Sig sends you out to find some artifacts in the desert, or when you need to destroy these caterpillar enemies in the Metalhead nest. This one in particular took me a long time. That Titan suit one I mentioned before, if you die at any point, it's back to the start as well. And the backtracking can still get in the way. There's still no fast travel for an area, so you'll need to hike it the long way. In the Wasteland, I think it gets bad when this temple is involved.
since it's so far away compared to every other landmark, and in Haven City at the beginning, I thought the issue was pretty much solved, since every landmark was so close by that you never had to travel far. But when you get HQ back, get ready for your tracks to get a lot longer. The worst being when you have to go from the forest and then have to make a, no joke, trek through the entire city a full 360 degrees just to make a trip back to HQ. Like, guys, seriously, come on. Have a back route or something so I don't need to literally go around the entire city. That's just padding. And traveling in Haven is just as bland as it was last time. It's mostly just these narrow halls now with even less happening in the city.
Jak 3 is a weird one to go back to, cause yeah, there were issues fixed, but it honestly feels like it was a band-aid approach to a lot of them, which ended up having a ripple effect through the game, and other major issues weren't addressed at all, which, unfortunately, is kinda the game's undoing.
You know, when I said I didn't remember much about Jak 3, I can kinda see why. It's not that I find Jak 3 bad, but I do find it's a very just there kind of game, you know what I mean? I enjoy the quality of life changes and some improvements from Jak 2, but in a way, Jak 3 kind of has the opposite problem I had with 2. While the difficulty in 2 I felt was just unfair and left me frustrated, Jak 3 honestly goes too far in the opposite direction, and I ended my journey feeling more bored than anything. It doesn't help that most of the game feels like it's riding the coattails of 2, without having much to call its own. I think it's better than Jak 2 just for the toned down difficulty and quality of life changes, but I won't lie, I think Jak 2 kept me more engaged and I felt like I got a more complete game there. And it had a better story for sure. So do I recommend Jak 3? I mean, I guess? I do definitely classify it under a one and done for me, and sadly, it's just an okay end for the trilogy to go out on.
Well, that's the end of that. I gotta say, in this trilogy, Jak 1 is the clear winner by a landslide. It's kind of ironic that the game Naughty Dog was trying to get away from is the one that honestly aged the best. Looking at the other two, it definitely feels like they were chasing trends at the time, and as such, I don't think they've aged very well. But that being said, I think they were about like one more attempt away from actually nailing this style, but I don't think that will really ever see the light of day anymore. I'll talk more about that, I feel, after the Lost Frontier review and the close-up of all this. Because now we're heading into spin-off territory, with the next one being the only one Naughty Dog did, Jak X Combat Racing. I'll see you then.